Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots. Bootlicker shows Dutch like search peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks, MAGA. I'm usually welcome. And so, people that have been watching my videos know that I have been giving a lot of praise for a lot of Trump's programs. I like a lot of things he's doing. I like the people he's appointed. I like the idea that we're going to have transformational change. I like the idea that he's addressing things like fraud, waste, inefficiency, and redundancy, and a bloated bureaucracy that hasn't been addressed for decades. I love the fact that he's moving fast on trying to settle the Ukraine-Russia war. There's a lot to be happy about, but I want to point out that I still have a lot of reservations about Trump. I don't know if he's the real thing. I've stated before that I'm still critical of him because overall he's still a statist, and his unflinching support for everything that Israel does is a great example of that. I'm really not on board with total and complete support of Israel and a lot of their horrifying policies, and certainly their complete destruction of Gaza, persecution of the Palestinians, and that whole history of that conflict. And he does seem to be, of course, it's only been a short time, so I'm going to keep my eyes open, but there's a lot of things that he hasn't talked about and things that he should do. And if he's the real thing, then we should be seeing him address some other big issues. Of course, one of the big issues I have is insider trading. And he has recently talked about taking a closer look at a lot of people in the U.S. government that seem to have bizarrely enriched themselves far beyond what their salaries, investments, book royalties, and speeches would do. And so it would appear he is looking at insider trading, but I would really like to see him get really serious about finding a way to completely eliminate insider trading. And I think with Doge and the kind of technology we have now, it's more possible than it's ever been. But that's something that definitely needs to be brought into line. Another thing is he going to address the record stock buybacks by corporations? They've been accelerating, and over the last 20 years, it goes back further than that. But this massive stock buybacks is really, I know theoretically it's legal, but it completely distorts the market. And corporations are the ones that are buying most of their stocks and distorting the prices and enriching their CEOs and enriching their shareholders. It's just an unsavory practice, and economically, it hides a lot of flaws in the system. And so I don't know if he's going to address that or not. Another thing it would be nice if he could address is hedge funds getting into the real estate business. When you have giant hedge funds like Blackstone buying up giant swaths of real estate across the country, it's hurting all Americans and completely distorts the housing market, artificially drives up the prices of real estate, and makes it that much harder for Americans to get into the real estate market. And so not only are they going out and buying whole neighborhoods and buying huge swaths of real estate all over the USA, but they're also doing it in Europe. And not only that, they're basically slumlords because they're very harsh with people that do end up renting properties from them, because that's part of the problem too. They're not only buying up real estate, they've turned into a lot of properties into rentals, and that's also driven up the price of rent for everyone else. So I don't know if Trump's going to do anything about that. Another thing is I'd like to see Trump address the problem about hedge funds and banks in general treating commodities as assets, and so they can artificially drive up prices and manipulate the market, and that just adds a lot of costs to the average American. And economists talk about it, but certainly politicians are not talking about it. And it's fine. Let these financial institutions and these banks dabble in all their usual investment fields, but when they get involved in commodities that affect prices for average Americans, then it seems to be there should be more regulation. but that's an area where Trump obviously is more into deregulation. He's not into regulation, so that's something we're probably not going to see. Another thing I'd like to see Trump address is the outrageous interest rates that credit cards companies charge. Um, the idea that people are paying 30% interest on credit cards is just outrageous. And we've seen this gradual rise over the years. It used to be that 10 or 15% seemed extravagant, and then we got into 20 and 25%. Now we're in the 30% area. And this is obviously, you know, if we're going to have presidents try and alleviate student student loan debt, somebody needs to take a close look at the credit card. So, you know, and part of it, I know the fact is that the banks' overdraft fees were regulated and curtailed some, so it's like whack-a-mole. You take the bank's money away from one area, and then they just jack up the interest rates on credit cards. But you know, if you really want to help out average Americans, especially the staggering debt load on credit cards that Americans have right now, do you want to give all Americans at all levels a break, then these outrageous credit card fees and interest rates need to be rolled back. Another thing that Trump doesn't seem to be talking about, he seems to be fully on board with maintaining the surveillance state and all the data and information that's collected and sold, the information industrial complex, as it were. You know, all this information that's absorbed by everybody from Facebook to Amazon to all the corporations, all the banks, and they buy and sell and trade all this information, and then that's part of the surveillance state too. And then there's just good old-fashioned spying where American intelligence agencies from the CIA and the FBI, and then just all the surveillance programs in general across the board. I remember there's quite a bit of outrage years ago when the whole idea of mass surveillance was revealed, but of course that was a cause du jour at the time, and now massive surveillance on all levels, full spectrum surveillance exists in our society, and nobody cares anymore because the media has decided it's not an issue, the politicians have decided it's not an issue, and that would be great if Trump would actually tackle the surveillance state and give Americans some privacy back. Then another one is digital currency. Trump seems to be all on board with the move towards central banks and digital currency, and that's going to be a disaster for everyone, and for the reasons I talked about. There's going to be a lot more control, there's going to be a lot more surveillance, and control being the main thing. If they get to the point where all our currency is digitized and we have a social credit system like China, then we could find a lot of people ostracized for all kinds of things, and digital currency is a great way to control people. And another thing I'd like to see Trump address is media misinformation. He talks all about fake news all the time, and it's kind of funny how certain sectors in American society can actually be prosecuted and persecuted for telling lies or exaggerating or spreading misinformation. That's all we've heard about for the last decade or so, is, you know, all the misinformation that's being spread out there by people on social media and the like. But how is it that we can't get serious about controlling all the lies and misinformation, not only coming from politicians, but particularly media? And once again, I know there's issues with regulation, but it seems like there should be some way to address and actually have some consequences, and these media outlets taking responsibility. I mean, we've seen outrageous things said. The latest one, of course, was Rachel Maddow going all apeshit about a Musk contract with the government, and it turns out it was Biden. And there should be consequences for spreading that kind of information, because part of the problem is once those lies and misinformation are told, the damage is already done. It's quietly backtracked behind closed doors, but I think there needs to be immediate consequences and some guidelines and guardrails, as they like to say these days, so that media is not allowed to spreads so many blatant lies and so much misinformation. And if they're going to curtail the average American's speech, we should also address the media and their hyperbole and histrionics, including, all these warnings about the death of democracy and Trump is Hitler and all that nonsense. It doesn't seem like it would be too hard to come up with some kind of guidelines. A good example of that would be the Hays Commission for the film industry. All the movie makers back in the 30s, early 30s, were filled movies with all kinds of violence and crime pays and babies born out of wedlock and celebrating people being completely drunk and all that kind of stuff. And the Hays Commission was instigated. The government put pressure, and the film industry came up with guidelines. And all of a sudden, in 1934, all that stuff disappeared. So we could do something along that line, a Hays Commission for news media, put pressure on them, and then they can come up with their own guidelines and systems of accountability, and we can get rid of all this horseshit that passes for so-called news. So anyway, that's just some things I was thinking about that right now, as people who watch me know, I'm not a Republican. I'm certainly not a Democrat. I'm not a MAGA. I just know good things when I see him, and Trump is doing a lot of good things right now, and I'd really like to see him be the real deal. And if he's not going to be the real deal, then I will continue to have problems with him. The programs he's put forth so far, I'm pretty much all on board with, even some of the more drastic ones. But let's see him put his money where his mouth is. He's got a lot of money and he's got a lot of mouth. So let's see what he's made of. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.